December carries a power most men never notice. While others see only the end of a calendar, the wise see a gate, a closing of one season and the opening of another. And the man who understands how to command this month does not wait for blessings. He summons them. You have felt it before, even if you could not name it, the quiet sense that the final month of the year holds unfinished promises, unopened doors, untapped strength. That feeling is accurate. December is not the conclusion. It is the furnace in which next year's wealth is forged. Think for a moment about how many Decembers you have drifted through, hoping life would somehow change with the strike of midnight. Yet nothing changed, because hope without command creates nothing. Wealth responds only to the man who issues a definite decree. Imagine approaching these final days with a mind sharpened like steel, clear, intentional, unwavering. Imagine speaking your desires with such conviction that opportunity begins to move toward you, allies appear, ideas multiply, and a path you never saw begins to unfold beneath your feet. Do not underestimate this month. December exposes the difference between the drifter and the decisive. The drifter waits for good fortune, the decisive demands it. He writes his aim. He reads it morning and night. He carries it as a burning picture in his mind until the world recognizes it as law. Ask yourself honestly, how many blessings have passed you by simply because you never claimed them? Wealth does not arrive to the hesitant. It arrives to the man who commands it with clarity, faith, and unwavering direction. December amplifies whatever spirit you bring into it. Picture your life 30 days from now. If you treat December as ordinary, you drag the old year with you. But if you treat it as sacred, as the month in which you seize authority over your destiny, the coming year bends in your favor and everything accelerates. Think of those you love. How different would their lives become if you entered this month with absolute certainty instead of vague desire? How relieved would your family feel when they witness your resolve? How inspired would your future self be watching you take command instead of waiting for miracles? Do not let your past Decembers deceive you. This month was never meant to be quiet. It was meant to be decisive. The universe does not bless the man who whispers his intentions. It blesses the man who declares them as though they were already his. You are not here by accident. You were drawn to these words because something in you is rising, something that refuses to coast toward the year's end. You sense that December is offering you a negotiation. Command it, and it will obey. Drift through it, and it will ignore you. Prepare yourself. What comes next is not a ritual of chance or superstition. It is the timeless law through which every prosperous man has shaped his fortune. December is ready to answer you, but only if you speak with the authority of one who expects to be obeyed. December stands before every man as a season of dominion, not decline. While the world rushes toward celebration and distraction, only a select few recognize that this final month holds a hidden power that bends itself toward the man who understands how to command it. December is not the closing of a year. It is the chamber in which a man decides what kind of life he will step into when the calendar turns. Those who drift through these days remain bound to the same results they have repeated for years. But the man who treats December as sacred ground becomes the architect of a future far greater than his past. There is a reason wealth answers more rapidly in December. The mind enters a natural state of reflection during these closing days, and with reflection comes receptivity. The spirit becomes attentive. The deeper mind becomes open. It is as though the gates of thought stand wider, ready to receive new commands with greater sensitivity. Some call this intuition. Others call it timing. I call it law. The subconscious responds more powerfully in December because the mind turns inward. And inwardness is the birthplace of power. A man's emotional state during this month silently dictates the rhythm of his entire next year. If he enters it with heaviness, doubt, or fatigue, these qualities echo into the months ahead. If he enters it with certainty, intention and direction, the coming year aligns itself with those qualities. December sets the current. It establishes the spiritual temperature of the next 12 months. This is why men of weak spirit allow December to pass without thought, while men of insight use December to seize control of their destiny. Drifting during the final month creates a weak beginning. It weakens the will. It weakens the imagination. It weakens the vision. A man who drifts through December enters January without fire, without clarity, without command. But a man who issues a definite December decree begins the new year with momentum so strong that circumstances bend beneath his conviction. He enters January already victorious because he prepared the ground beforehand. Wealth favors the man who moves early. History reveals powerful men who made decisive year-end turns that changed not only their fortunes, but the fortunes of generations. Andrew Carnegie used the final weeks of each year to close deals, secure agreements, and set new standards for the months to come. John D. Rockefeller treated December as the anchor of his empire, solidifying direction, strengthening plans, and bringing order to every detail. Henry Ford spent his winters refining visions, adjusting methods, and shaping the ideas that would revolutionize industry. These men did not wait for January to begin their work. They began in December, and the world followed their example. Depletion at year's end is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that the spirit is asking for elevation. When a man feels worn beneath the weight of the year behind him, it is because his old direction is no longer sufficient for the spirit that now inhabits him. His exhaustion is not a collapse. It is a summons. It is life announcing that the man has outgrown the level he has occupied and must now rise to something greater. December reveals this truth for only those who listen. The man who issues a December decree becomes magnetic to opportunity. When he selects a definite aim for the month and commands it with conviction, the subconscious begins gathering ideas, insights, and resources that support his direction. The world responds to the tone of command. Opportunities that were invisible begin to reveal themselves. Allies emerge. Doors that once seemed closed begin to open. December amplifies whatever power you speak into it. Others sense the seriousness of a man who treats the end of the year as a battlefield rather than a holiday. They observe his clarity. They feel his steadiness. They recognize a calm urgency in his actions. They do not hear him make loud proclamations. They notice a quiet intensity that signals purpose. People instinctively trust a man who carries purpose into December. They follow him. They cooperate with him. They respect him. For the man who is serious in December will be powerful in January. When a man treats December as sacred ground, an inner transformation occurs. His thoughts sharpen. His will strengthens. His fears weaken. His imagination grows clearer. He steps out of old habits and stands firmly in the possibility of new ones. He feels a shift within himself. A shift from drifting to directing, from hoping to commanding, from waiting to creating. This transformation is not visible at first, but its effects become unmistakable as the days progress. To tune the mind toward wealth command, a man must speak to himself as one who expects to be obeyed. He must say with fervor, "December obeys my direction. Wealth moves toward my certainty. I stand at the gate of a new year as its master, not its servant." These affirmations, spoken with authority, shape the subconscious into a state of readiness. The mind begins to accept the idea that wealth is not a distant dream, but a natural extension of the man's dominion. He must also say, "I finish strong. I rise now. My spirit commands my conditions." Repetition turns these sentences into conviction. Conviction turns them into law, and law, once accepted by the subconscious, shapes every action and thought that follows. This is the method by which a man commands December to deliver wealth. December is the month where a man may claim the power that belongs to him, but which he has not yet exercised. If he speaks with clarity, thinks with purpose, and acts with decision, the last 31 days of the year will carry more force than the previous 11 months combined. For the universe respects the man who ends with strength more than the man who begins with noise. This is the law of December dominion. The man who honors it becomes unstoppable. The man who ignores it becomes forgettable. There comes a moment in every man's life when he must decide whether he will continue to treat wealth as a distant possibility or whether he will claim it as a rightful extension of his own mental dominion. Wealth does not respond to hesitation. It does not yield itself to the man who approaches timidly, hoping it may come if enough wishes are whispered into the air. Wealth is a servant of definite command, and it bends itself toward the man who speaks with authority. Not the man who waits for permission. December magnifies this truth, for the subconscious becomes unusually receptive during this sacred month. The mind, softened by reflection and sharpened by expectancy, listens more deeply than at any other time. And because it listens, it obeys faster. The principle of wealth command is simple to state, yet challenging for most to embody. The world reacts to the man who declares his aim as law, not as hope, not as intention, not as desire, as law. A man must stand before his own mind and speak with the tone of leadership. He must speak not as one negotiating with fate, but as one instructing destiny. The subconscious, which governs action, emotion, habit, imagination, and opportunity, does not answer to half-spoken desires. It answers only to definiteness. What you speak in December becomes the blueprint your subconscious follows in January. This is why December holds such immense force. Words spoken in this month sink deeper into the inner chambers of thought. The mind, reviewing the year behind it and envisioning the year before it, becomes fertile soil for seeds of wealth. If those seeds are planted with authority, they grow with remarkable speed. But if a man plants seeds of doubt, fear, and uncertainty, he will reap a year filled with the fruits of that weakness. Wealth must be spoken to with authority. It is not enough to say, "I would like to prosper." One must say, "I shall prosper. Wealth is mine. Wealth belongs to me because I have claimed it with a definite purpose and backed it with unwavering belief." Such declarations do not come from arrogance. They come from alignment. When a man aligns thought, word, and purpose, his subconscious accepts the message as a command. And once the subconscious accepts it, infinite intelligence begins arranging circumstances, ideas, opportunities, and relationships around the man's decree. There is a profound difference between stating a desire and issuing a decree. A desire says, "I hope this will come to me." A decree says, "This must come to me because I have chosen it, demanded it, and aligned myself with it." A desire waits. A decree moves. A desire depends on mood. A decree depends on decision. A desire is easily forgotten. A decree becomes a spiritual contract written upon the mind. Consider the examples of men who commanded their wealth, not merely wished for it. Thomas Edison did not hope that the electric light would come. He commanded the forces of thought to deliver it. He declared himself an inventor long before the world acknowledged him as one. His mind accepted this identity, and because identity governs action, his entire life took shape around that command. When failures arrived, he did not view them as verdicts against his aim. He viewed them as steps toward the realization of his decree. Charles Schwab, too, commanded his rise. He stood before opportunities that seemed far beyond his youth and experience, yet he carried himself with the certainty of a man who knew he belonged in the halls of industry. He spoke with conviction, thought with direction, and acted with boldness. He commanded steel not with arrogance, but with clarity. And the world responded because the world respects the man who respects his purpose. Andrew Carnegie commanded opportunity with the same firmness. He did not drift into wealth by accident. He declared that he would rise above the limitations of his birth. He declared that he would manage men, build organizations, and master enterprise. The world saw a young boy working in factories. Carnegie saw a leader in training. His command preceded his success, not the other way around. December magnifies the force of a man's declarations because the mind is closing one cycle and preparing to open another. The subconscious is like a gate that swings wide during this month. If a man speaks vague desires, he closes the new year with weakness. But if he speaks a decree, clear, definite, absolute, he opens the new year with power. The subconscious becomes obedient when a December aim is written, spoken aloud, and repeated morning and night. The repetition is not mere ritual. It is the method by which thought penetrates the deeper mind. The subconscious does not resist repetition. It absorbs it, and once absorbed, the repeated thought becomes a mental pattern, shaping actions, reactions, habits, and the man's very sense of possibility. A December decree must therefore be written on paper. Writing is the act of engraving thought into physical form. It transforms an idea into a plan, a wish into an instruction, a desire into a directive. Once written, the decree must be read aloud morning and night. Speaking it aloud gives it tone, emotion, and vitality. The subconscious responds more quickly to spoken commands than silent ones, for the voice carries authority. The tone of certainty draws resources, allies, and ideas. Certainty annuls hesitation. Certainty strengthens the will. Certainty burns away doubt. When a man speaks with certainty, others feel its weight. They instinctively trust him. They offer their cooperation. They present opportunities. They share insights. They follow his lead. For certainty is rare and therefore revered. When a man declares wealth as a duty rather than a hope, his mind sharpens. He no longer treats wealth as a fantasy or a comfort. He treats it as a responsibility. This shift transforms his conduct. His attention becomes sharper. His daily actions gain precision. His habits become purposeful. His energy becomes steady. Ordinary pleasures lose their hold over him. He becomes a man driven by direction rather than distraction. Others observe the transformation even if they cannot explain it. They notice that his voice carries more confidence and less apology. They notice that he moves with intention. They sense that he is no longer waiting for luck, but summoning his own fortune. A man who speaks with command becomes unmistakable. He does not need to announce his change. His very bearing announces it for him. There is a sacred seriousness that enters the man who commands wealth. It is not heaviness, it is dignity. It is the dignity of a soul that has decided to take responsibility for its own prosperity. Such a man is no longer at the mercy of chance. He understands that the universe responds to direction, not hesitation. He understands that wealth is not outside him. It is drawn forth from within him through the law of command. A man may begin tuning his mind toward wealth command through affirmations spoken with calm authority. He must say, "Wealth moves toward my clarity. My decree is law. I command my fortune with thought, word, and will." These affirmations are not mere phrases. They are spiritual directives sent into the subconscious. The subconscious organizes life according to the strongest repeated command. When the command is wealth, life reorganizes itself around abundance. He must also affirm, "I am the master of my conditions. I claim prosperity. I direct opportunity. I summon success." When spoken daily, these affirmations become the foundation upon which the next year is built. They awaken inner power. They strengthen conviction. They turn thought into magnetism. December is the only month in which the mind is naturally suspended between what has been and what shall be. It is a bridge, and bridges are places of power. A man may cross the bridge unconsciously, allowing old fears to follow him, or he may stand upon it with authority and declare, "Only that which aligns with my purpose may cross with me." If he does so, his next year becomes the natural result of the command he issued in December. Wealth follows certainty. Opportunity follows direction. Success follows command. No, speak with authority. Write with clarity, repeat with conviction, and December will obey you. There comes a moment in every man's life when he must enter the furnace of his own thought, for no amount of labor, effort, or ambition can compensate for an undisciplined mind. And December, with its stillness, its closing cycle, its deep inward atmosphere, becomes the ideal month for that inward forging. While the world concerns itself with celebration and sentiment, the man of purpose steps into the chamber of reflection, where thought becomes the architect of the coming year. Thought is the most powerful force a man possesses, yet most men treat it as a drifting cloud rather than a tool of construction. December exposes this negligence. It brings before a man every choice he has made, every direction he has taken, every opportunity he has neglected, and every desire he has abandoned. This month does not judge him, it simply reveals. And revelation is the beginning of wisdom, for what is seen can be shaped, but what remains unseen continues to shape the man without his awareness. December is a furnace because the mind becomes heated with remembrance, imagery, and yearning. Old ideas rise to the surface. Some must be burned away, others refined into sharper forms. A man who fears this process remains imprisoned by the remnants of former years. But a man who embraces this inward heat becomes stronger, purer, and more conscious of the power he holds over his own destiny. Thought becomes the architect of next year's wealth. Wealth does not begin in opportunity, it begins in thought. Opportunity is merely the expression of a thought that has gained momentum. The man who allows December to pass without reorganizing his thought remains controlled by habits that no longer serve him. But the man who shapes thought with intention during this month creates a blueprint that the subconscious cannot ignore. There is a reason the mind thinks with greater clarity and seriousness in December. The year's end acts as a mirror, forcing the man to see himself without illusion. He sees where he has drifted. He sees where he has been lazy. He sees where he has lacked courage. But he also sees the glimpses of greatness that lie dormant within him. This mixture of truth and possibility creates a mental sharpness rarely found in other months. Idle imagination is not enough to create wealth. A man may daydream endlessly and yet remain poor. The difference between idle imagination and creative thought is direction. Idle imagination wanders. Creative thought builds. Idle imagination escapes reality. Creative thought transforms it. December demands creative thought backed by desire, for desire gives heat to the image, and heat is what shapes the metal of one's future. Consider how Henry Ford refined his entire vision during the winter months. When others retreated from the cold, he retreated into thought. He questioned assumptions. He dismantled his old beliefs. He refined his methods. He sharpened his ideas. The winter did not slow him. It focused him. His greatest breakthroughs emerged not during the noise of summer, but during the silence of December. Abraham Lincoln used the same season to strengthen direction. In winter, he confronted himself without distraction. He examined the nation's pulse. He studied his own reasoning. He stepped back from the storm of public opinion and entered the inner chambers of private thought where clarity could be found. The winter season matured his leadership and steadied his resolve. A man cannot hope to attract wealth if his mind remains cluttered with the debris of doubt, fear, envy, resentment, and timidity. These emotions poison thought. They weaken imagination. They limit the spirit. December's furnace is meant to burn them away. The man who avoids this purification drags the same chains into the next year and then wonders why nothing changes. Thought must be purified because wealth requires a single commanding picture held with unwavering belief. The mind cannot serve two masters. It cannot chase prosperity and entertain fear. It cannot pursue a definite aim and indulge envy. It cannot call forth success while secretly expecting defeat. The subconscious becomes confused when the conscious mind sends mixed commands. December is the month to correct this confusion. Others respond differently to a man whose December thought becomes focused, calm, disciplined, and controlled. They feel his steadiness. They sense his direction. They find comfort in his certainty. Such a man does not waver in speech or conduct. He does not explain his decisions. He simply acts. He does not seek permission. He grants it to himself. People instinctively gather around him because confidence is attractive and clarity is rare. The power of evening reflection during December cannot be overstated. Each night offers the man an opportunity to review the day, measure his thoughts, assess his conduct, and refine his direction. In these quiet hours, he strengthens his mind. He clears away clutter. He replaces weak thoughts with strong ones. He corrects errors before they become patterns. Evening reflection becomes the ritual that shapes the identity he will carry into the new year. A man must learn to think of his mind as a workshop where each idea is a tool and each emotion a flame. December is the month in which the workshop must be cleaned, reorganized, sharpened, and prepared for labor. The man who enters January with a cluttered mind begins the year defeated. But the man who enters with a clear workshop begins with power. Thought, when disciplined, becomes a creative instrument through which wealth flows. It is the conductor of every action, the initiator of every opportunity, the architect of every achievement. A man who controls his thought controls his fate. A man who neglects his thought becomes a victim of habit, chance, and circumstance. December gives him the opportunity to choose which role he will play. December thought must be shaped slowly, deliberately, intentionally. The man must sit with pen and paper. He must write the thoughts that rule him. He must write the thoughts that weaken him. He must write the thoughts he wishes to adopt. By writing them, he transfers them from the formless realm of mental fog into the world of structure. The subconscious recognizes written thought as law. During this month, he must also saturate his mind with affirmations that tune it toward wealth. He must speak sentences such as, "My mind is the source of my wealth. My thoughts command my future. I purify my thinking and align it with my destiny." These words carry force because they reshape the image he holds of himself, and the image governs everything. He must also affirm, "I burn away doubt. I strengthen desire, I forge direction, my thought becomes a magnet for prosperity." Spoken with conviction, these sentences awaken a sense of mastery that transforms his entire bearing. December is not a month of waiting. It is a month of forging. It is the furnace in which next year's fortune is shaped. The man who treats it lightly weakens his future. The man who treats it with reverence commands his future. Thought is the furnace, and December is the heat. And now your next part waits. There comes a decisive hour in a man's life when he must understand that identity governs destiny, and December is the month in which identity may be rewritten with greater power than at any other time. A man does not rise above his present life by changing his circumstances alone. He rises by changing the self that faces those circumstances. Identity precedes every action, every decision, every habit, every victory, and every failure. And December, with its closing atmosphere and its silent inward pull, becomes the spiritual workshop in which identity may be reforged with extraordinary force. A man must accept a truth that few dare to confront. He has lived the year according to the man he believed himself to be, not according to the man he hoped to become. His successes were shaped by his identity. His failures were shaped by his identity. His limitations were enforced by his identity. If he repeats the same identity, he will repeat the same results. A man cannot expect a new financial year while keeping the same inner self. He must dismiss the old identity before the new one can take command of his thought. December exists for this very purpose. It is the end of the old year's habits and the beginning of the new year's possibilities. A man who uses December to consciously appoint a new identity gains an advantage over all who enter January as the same person they were the year before. For wealth does not answer merely to plans. It answers to the kind of man who issues those plans. Wealth belongs to the man whose identity is large enough, strong enough, disciplined enough, and faithful enough to hold it. Identity is not formed by accident. It is not shaped by fate. It is shaped by decision. Every prosperous man in history began with a declaration of identity long before evidence appeared to support it. Andrew Carnegie decided early in his youth that he would become a man of enterprise, even though he worked in poverty and had no proof of his future. His identity came first. His results came later. Thomas Edison declared himself an inventor before he ever produced a successful idea. His identity came first. The world's recognition came later. A man repeats the same financial year repeatedly when he keeps the same identity. Identity sets the ceiling for effort, perception, imagination, and persistence. A man cannot outperform the belief he holds about himself. If he sees himself as limited, life obeys that limitation. If he sees himself as incapable, opportunity hides from him. If he sees himself as unworthy of wealth, he will sabotage every step toward it. But when a man declares a new identity, he opens the gates for new behavior. December must therefore be treated as the month for appointing a new self, not imagining one, not hoping for one, appointing one. A man must stand before the mirror and say with firmness, "The man I have been ends this month. The man I become begins this month." This is not poetry. It is law. When the subconscious hears such a declaration spoken with conviction, it begins dissolving the old identity and assembling the new one. But identity change is not a soft process. The old identity will resist. It will whisper that change is unnecessary. It will remind the man of his past failures. It will call forth memories of weakness. It will attempt to anchor him to the familiar. This resistance is natural. It is the final defense of the self that must perish. If the man yields to this resistance, he remains the prisoner of habit. But if he rejects it, he becomes the master of himself. December identity change alters a man's voice. His tone becomes steadier, calmer, more commanding. He speaks from the spirit, not from fear. His posture changes. He stands straighter, walks with intention, and carries himself with the quiet confidence of a man who knows where he is going. His habits change because identity determines habit. A man cannot pretend to be wealthy in thought and then behave with the habits of poverty. Identity demands consistency. Others feel these changes before they see them. They sense a sharpening in his presence. They sense a gravity in his manner. They sense a seriousness that was not there before. A man who chooses his identity with firmness emits an energy that others instinctively respect. They treat him not as he was, but as the identity he now carries. This is the spiritual truth of human interaction. Others treat you according to the identity you project, not the condition you inhabit. December is the only month that grants a man the time, silence, and inward atmosphere necessary to examine the identity he has carried through the year. Without this examination, he repeats himself. With it, he becomes new. A man must list the qualities of the identity that failed him. He must write them down plainly: fearfulness, hesitancy, indecision, laziness, small thinking, weak courage. Then he must declare, "These qualities no longer belong to me. They are dismissed from my character." The subconscious receives dismissal as seriously as it receives instruction. Then he must write the qualities of the identity he now chooses: courage, decisiveness, boldness, persistence, clarity, faith, discipline. He must write them not as aspirations, but as law. He must declare, "These qualities define the man I am becoming." The subconscious treats these written qualities as the blueprint for future behavior. And once identity shifts, everything shifts with it. A December identity change hardens into character through repetition. A man must speak his chosen identity aloud, morning and night. This is a sacred practice. This is the method by which kings forge their dignity, leaders forge their presence, and builders forge their endurance. The repetition is not empty ritual, it is the hammer that shapes the subconscious. Each repetition strengthens the new identity until it becomes natural. Repetition creates certainty. Certainty creates action. Action creates results. Results create faith. Faith reinforces identity, and identity governs the entire man. This cycle begins in December, but it must continue through the year. The man who faithfully repeats his chosen identity for 31 days will enter January with a power he has never known. People begin to trust and follow a man who has chosen his new self with firmness. They sense he cannot be shaken. They sense he cannot be discouraged. They sense he has standards. They sense he has direction. Such a man becomes an anchor in his environment. Others lean on him because he stands tall. Others believe in him because he believes in himself. Others invest in him because he invests in his own mind. Affirmations bind identity to wealth, purpose, and direction. The man must say, "I am the master of my destiny. My identity commands prosperity. My character attracts opportunity. I rise as the man who is prepared to hold wealth with dignity." These words must be spoken with slow authority. They must be spoken as one speaks a decree. The subconscious responds to tone. A timid tone weakens the affirmation, a confident tone engraves it. He must also say, "I release the identity that has limited me. I step into the identity that enriches me. My thought, my voice, and my will align with abundance." These sentences create the inner architecture upon which wealth is constructed. December identity change is not merely an exercise. It is a spiritual rebirth. It is the dismissal of the weak and the appointment of the strong. It is the death of hesitation and the birth of dominion. It is the shedding of the old and the claiming of the new. A man who neglects this process enters the next year as a weakened version of himself. But a man who performs it enters as a sovereign over his future. Identity is the throne. December is the coronation. He must take his place. There comes a time in every man's life when he must realize that discipline is not merely a habit, it is the very scepter of his authority. And December, more than any other month, demands that a man take hold of this scepter with both hands and wield it with unwavering firmness. For December exposes the truth that no man escapes. The way he closes the year determines the way he enters the next. If he ends weak, he begins weak. If he ends with drift, he begins with drift. But if he ends with discipline, calm, focused, deliberate, he enters the next year already victorious. Most men welcome December with idleness, comfort, and distraction. They claim they are resting. They claim they deserve ease. They claim the year has been difficult enough. Yet what they call rest is often retreat. And what they call ease is often escape. They allow their standards to loosen. They allow their purpose to fade. They allow their days to drift into indulgence. And when January arrives, they wonder why the year greets them with confusion instead of opportunity. But the man who understands the law of December discipline knows better. He knows that this month is not a time for collapse. It is a time for consolidation. It is a time to gather strength, sharpen intention, and bring order to the inner kingdom. It is a time to step back from the world, not to relax, but to review with clarity and rebuild with precision. December is the crucible in which a man proves whether he governs himself or whether he is governed by mood and circumstance. Discipline in December produces results far beyond the scale of ordinary months. It multiplies effort tenfold because the subconscious is more open, more impressionable, and more eager to receive command. When the man disciplines himself during this transitional season, the subconscious carries that discipline forward into the year ahead, turning it into habit, instinct, and identity. A disciplined December becomes a disciplined year because habits formed in this month sink deeper into the mind's foundation. The principle of closing the year like a king is one of the greatest secrets of success. A king does not end his year scrambling. He ends it reviewing. He ends it commanding. He ends it by examining accounts, clarifying his next conquests, strengthening his alliances, and declaring the standards by which his kingdom shall operate. The man who adopts this regal conduct discovers that wealth gravitates toward order, not chaos. Wealth responds to direction, not hesitation. Wealth bows to discipline, not to drift. The ritual of December discipline begins first with settling accounts, both inward and outward. The man must examine the decisions he has made, the promises he has broken, the duties he has neglected, and the victories he has achieved. He must see everything clearly. He must write down the truths he has ignored. He must confront the habits that have weakened him. He must acknowledge the actions that have strengthened him. By doing so, he clears the fog from his mind and prepares the soil for new roots. Next comes the clarification of aims. A man must choose the direction for his next year with the seriousness of a general choosing the battlefield. He must not write vague hopes. He must write definite commands. He must form an aim so clear that his subconscious cannot misunderstand it, so compelling that his imagination cannot ignore it, so strong that his will cannot resist it. December is the month in which vague goals are burned away and replaced with definite purpose. Then he must turn to tightening daily conduct. Every small action must reflect the man he intends to become. He must rise with seriousness. He must think with precision. He must act with intention. He must remove the small weaknesses that have followed him through the year. Inconsistent effort, wandering thought, idle talk, wasted time, indulgent habits. December sharpens a man because December reveals the cost of his past indiscipline. Every wasted hour of the year crystallizes in his awareness, and this awareness becomes fuel for discipline. Daily order attracts opportunity and wealth because a disciplined mind becomes a magnetic mind. A man who brings order into his habits brings order into his results. Wealth avoids the disorganized man because he cannot hold it. Wealth avoids the inconsistent man because he cannot protect it. Wealth avoids the indecisive man because he cannot command it. But wealth finds the disciplined man because discipline proves he is worthy of responsibility and capable of developing it into greater strength. The greatest builders of history mastered December discipline. John D. Rockefeller used the final days of each year to review every financial detail with meticulous precision. He treated December not as a celebration, but as an audit of his mind, his strategy, and his enterprise. Henry Ford approached winter as a planning chamber. While others slowed down, he refined designs, simplified methods, and prepared the groundwork for the next year's breakthroughs. These men achieved greatness not because they possessed exceptional luck, but because they understood that December is the month in which destiny is shaped. Why does a disciplined December create such irresistible January momentum? Because a man who begins January already in motion enters the new year ahead of the crowd, while others are waiting for inspiration, he is executing his plan. While others are forming resolutions, he is reinforcing habits. While others are resting, he is advancing. While others approach the new year with uncertainty, he approaches with mastery. This momentum becomes a spiritual wind that carries him through the year. Others observe the quiet strength of a man who controls his last month with intensity. They see that he does not collapse into comfort. They see that he does not drift into idleness. They see that he uses the final days with more seriousness than the early ones, and their respect grows. They trust his leadership. They sense his dignity. They are drawn to the steadiness of a man who treats December as a sacred workshop rather than a season of escape. December discipline produces spiritual confidence. The man senses that he governs himself. He feels the quiet power of self-command. He knows that he can rely on his own will. This confidence does not come from outward achievements, it comes from private conduct. It comes from the victory of choosing discipline when comfort was available. It comes from the triumph of directing the mind when the mind sought to wander. Discipline creates internal triumphs long before external triumphs appear. Repetition in December is the mechanism by which discipline hardens into habit. A man must repeat small acts of mastery every day, rising at a set hour, reading with intention, writing with clarity, reviewing his purpose, controlling his attention, and honoring his schedule. These small acts, carried out consistently, shape the muscles of character. A man does not become disciplined through one great effort. He becomes disciplined through many small victories. There is no act too small to strengthen discipline. The way a man stands, the way he speaks, the way he organizes his space, the way he decides, the way he responds to difficulty, every small act holds within it the seed of mastery or the seed of weakness. December is the month for sowing consciously. A disciplined December also cleanses a man of the false belief that he needs motivation to act. He learns instead that action produces motivation, not the other way around. Once he sees that discipline is independent of mood, he becomes unstoppable. He no longer waits for the right time or the right feeling. He acts because action aligns him with his identity and his purpose. The affirmations that support December discipline must be spoken with deep conviction. A man must say, "I govern my days. I direct my actions. I bring order to my life. My discipline shapes my destiny." These words must be spoken slowly, deliberately, so they sink into the subconscious with the weight of authority. He must also affirm, "I finish the year with strength. I enter the new year with mastery. My conduct reflects my future, not my past." These affirmations repel weakness. They dissolve hesitation. They awaken the instinct of command. A man must treat December as the training ground for the next 12 months. He must view each disciplined act as a contract with the future. He must understand that nothing he does in December is lost. Every hour, every decision, every repetition becomes the foundation of the year that follows. Discipline is the gatekeeper of wealth. December is the gate. A man must pass through it with intention. There comes a solemn moment in every man's life when he must understand that faith, not labor, is the original cause of every lasting gain, and December is the month in which faith is tested with the greatest pressure. For faith is not required when circumstances are bright. Faith is required when the year has worn down a man's spirit, when disappointments sit heavy upon him, when the results he expected have not yet materialized, and when his heart whispers doubt more loudly than desire. December faith is rare because it must stand against the entire weight of the year behind it. A man may speak of faith in the early months when hope is fresh, but December demands a higher strength. It demands the kind of faith that stands while carrying the burden of a full year's failures, trials, and unanswered efforts. This is why faith held in December possesses 10 times the power of faith held in any other season. It is faith purified by fire, faith sharpened by pressure, faith proven through endurance. When a man holds faith in December, he stands at the secret gate through which only a few pass. For this gate does not open to the man who merely wishes for success. It opens only to the man who, despite every discouragement, declares, "I still believe, I still expect, I still command my destiny." The world steps aside for such a man because he demonstrates mastery over the most difficult territory of all, his own thought. Faith is strongest when spoken after disappointment, for disappointment is the furnace that tests whether belief was genuine or merely convenient. When a man's plans collapse and yet he still chooses to believe, he enters a state of spiritual authority. He proves to his subconscious that his belief is not dependent on circumstance. The subconscious then aligns with this firmness and begins to rebuild the man's path with renewed vigor. The law that Faith held in December sets the tone for the entire coming year is not poetic. It is scientific in the truest spiritual sense. December creates a heightened receptivity in the subconscious because the mind is reviewing the past and anticipating the future at the same time. This dual movement opens the inner gate through which suggestions enter more deeply. When a man pours faith into this gate, he gives the subconscious an anchor so strong that it shapes the coming year with unbreakable conviction. Faith must be built through repetition, visualization, and spoken command. A man must repeat his aim aloud, not because repetition is ritual, but because repetition engraves thought into the subconscious. He must visualize the achievement of his desire because the subconscious responds more powerfully to images than to words alone. And he must speak with conviction, for tone carries authority, and authority penetrates deeply into the inner mind. Consider the example of Lincoln, who held faith against chaos. There were nights when every external sign pointed toward ruin, yet he refused to surrender belief. His faith was not the fragile optimism of a hopeful dreamer. It was the iron conviction of a man who had chosen his destiny and refused to abandon it. His victories were born from nights when faith stood alone against the darkness. Edison, too, believed against failure. Thousands of attempts collapsed beneath him. Every experiment seemed to mock him. Yet he held the picture of success so firmly in his mind that the world eventually bent itself to his perseverance. His faith was not a fleeting feeling, but a settled decision. When the world declared defeat, Edison declared inevitability, and the world obeyed him. Charles Schwab held faith against weakness. When others doubted him because of his youth, he answered their doubt not through argument, but through steady belief in himself. He saw himself as capable long before others saw it. His faith created opportunities that would have remained invisible to the man who waited for approval. Faith held in December becomes spiritual magnetism for wealth. For wealth is not merely the accumulation of money. It is the accumulation of power, confidence, clarity, and direction. A man who carries December faith into January becomes irresistible to opportunity because his belief radiates outward into every action he takes. His speech becomes stronger. His posture becomes steadier. His decisions become bolder. Others feel the certainty that surrounds him, even if they cannot name its source. There is a quiet dignity in the man who refuses to doubt his future. This dignity does not come from pride, but from mastery. He has conquered the most challenging adversary of all, the inner voice that whispers defeat. When he silences this voice, he becomes formidable. For the world cannot intimidate a man who has subdued his own doubts. December faith dissolves fear because fear thrives only in the absence of belief. When a man holds a picture of victory so firmly that no contradiction can shake it, fear loses its strength. Fear feeds on uncertainty. When a man removes uncertainty through faith, fear weakens and eventually disappears. This is why a single month of strong December faith can change the entire direction of a man's life. December. Faith awakens imagination because imagination is the partner of belief. A man who doubts cannot imagine, for doubt closes the channels of creative thought. But the man who believes, even without evidence, opens the channels of intelligence, inspiration, and insight. Infinite intelligence responds to faith like a spark responds to oxygen. Faith ignites ideas. Ideas ignite opportunity. Opportunity ignites achievement. Others feel your renewed faith even before results appear. They notice the steadiness of your conduct. They hear the firmness in your voice. They sense the shift in your spirit. They may not understand its source, but they recognize its presence. Faith creates an aura of expectation, and expectation draws circumstances that match it. A man must protect his December faith with vigilance. He must shut the door against the influence of negative voices. He must guard his mind against gossip, complaint, criticism, and fear. He must avoid conversations that weaken his belief. He must refuse to entertain thoughts that contradict his aim, for faith grows only in environments of strength. December faith is strengthened through nightly review. Each evening, a man must sit silently and examine the conduct of his day. He must ask, where did I hold faith? Where did I let doubt enter? This review is not criticism, it is calibration. It allows him to adjust his mind before sleep, when the subconscious is most impressionable. A single night of strong faith spoken before sleep can influence the entire next day. The affirmations that anchor December faith must be spoken with solemn authority. A man must say, I believe in my destiny. I believe in my power. I believe in the wealth that moves toward me. These words must be spoken slowly, as if chiseling them into stone. He must also say, my faith is stronger than my past. My faith rebuilds my future. My faith commands the forces that shape my life. When spoken with feeling, these affirmations enter the subconscious like seed into fertile soil. A man must understand that December faith is not weakness, it is the birth of dominion. For faith is not blind hope, it is conscious command. It is the conviction that the unseen is more powerful than the seen. It is the certainty that the future bends toward the man who refuses to doubt. Faith is the gate. December is the key. A man must turn the key with unwavering resolve. There comes a solemn hour at the end of every great inward journey when a man must stop gathering principles and begin issuing commands. Knowledge alone cannot alter destiny. Reflection alone cannot transform a year. Only the man who decrees the law of his own future becomes the master of it. December is the final stage of this inward ascent, the moment when the man must speak the decree that seals his authority over the year ahead. The final decree is not a wish. It is not a hope. It is not a dream whispered into the air. It is a statement issued with the tone of one who expects obedience. For the universe does not bend itself around the man who merely desires. It bends around the man who commands. December magnifies this command because it is the final hinge on which the year turns. A decree issued in this sacred month enters the subconscious with a force multiplied by the weight of the closing cycle and the anticipation of the one about to open. Surrender becomes seductive in moments of fatigue, and December brings this temptation to its highest point. The mind, worn from the battles of the year, begins to whisper that it would be easier to collapse, to allow the final days to pass without effort, to tell oneself that the next year will begin fresh, without the need for decisive action. But this is the trap that has kept men poor, uncertain, and drifting for generations. The man who succumbs to this temptation carries weakness into the next year, and weakness multiplies itself until it becomes defeat. The danger of giving in at the edge of breakthrough cannot be overstated. Nature applies the greatest pressure an inch before victory. She examines the man's seriousness. She tests his endurance. She weighs his conviction. And only when he refuses to give in does she open the gate. The man who collapses at this threshold loses not merely the progress he has made, but the version of himself he was becoming. The man who stands firm gains a strength that becomes the cornerstone of his future. Persistence reveals a man's true character, for persistence is the measure of his spirit. Talent cannot replace persistence. Intelligence cannot replace persistence. Only persistence reveals what a man is made of. The world respects the man who persists because he demonstrates mastery over his own nature. He shows that he cannot be controlled by discouragement, cannot be halted by difficulty, and cannot be swayed by fear. Persistence is the signature of greatness. There is a spiritual law that rewards the man who refuses retreat. This law is woven into the fabric of life itself. It states that no man can be denied who insists without wavering. The universe must open its doors to the man who stands at them without moving. This is not superstition. It is a principle observed in every man who has risen above limitation. When a man's will becomes immovable, the world reorganizes itself around his determination. Consider Rockefeller's refusal to collapse under pressure. In the early days of his enterprise, he faced storms that would have crushed a weaker man. Markets fell. Rivals attacked. Circumstances darkened. Yet Rockefeller's mind remained unshaken. He held his purpose with such calm conviction that adversity eventually surrendered to him. His decree did not come from arrogance. It came from certainty. And that certainty shaped an empire. Henry Ford possessed the same refusal. When men mocked his ideas, when investors abandoned him, when attempts failed, he did not retreat. He spoke his decree with clarity. The motor car would shape the world. He declared this truth not because evidence supported it, but because his spirit supported it. His decree preceded every success. The world yielded because Ford did not yield. Carnegie made decisive vows at the end of his early years, vows that shaped the entire arc of his life. He declared that he would rise above the circumstances of his birth. He declared that he would create enterprises of lasting influence. He declared that he would become a leader of men. These were not suggestions. They were decrees. His subconscious accepted them as law, and his life unfolded accordingly. A man must learn from these examples. The world bends itself around the man who refuses to carry the old into the new. If he brings old fears into the next year, fear rules him. If he brings old doubts into the next year, doubt shapes his conduct. If he brings old habits into the next year, habit dictates his destiny. The man must reject the old year, its defeats, its delays, its weaknesses, so that none of it may follow him into the next. The act of issuing a final decree is the act of spiritual closure. It is the moment when the man commands his subconscious to dismiss the remnants of the year behind him and to prepare for the one before him. He must say with authority, "The old year is closed. Its failures do not govern me. Its limitations do not belong to me. I dismiss its doubts. I erase its fears. I stand as the man who commands the new year." Such a declaration severs the binding threads that tie him to the past. Others witness the transformation in a man who issues such a decree. They hear it in his tone. They see it in his posture. They sense it in the steadiness of his conduct. A man who has spoken his decree with confidence carries himself differently. His decisions are decisive. His actions are immediate. His attention is sharp. His voice commands respect. People instinctively recognize that he has undergone an inner shift. The transformation others witness is not the result of performance. It is the result of alignment. A man aligned with his decree does not explain himself. He does not justify himself. He does not seek reassurance. He simply acts in harmony with the identity he has chosen. His conviction becomes his greatest influence. His direction becomes his greatest strength. A deep sense of personal power arises from the act of refusing surrender. When a man stands firm at the end of the year, he gains mastery over himself. He proves that his will is stronger than his feelings, that his direction is stronger than his fatigue, that his conviction is stronger than his discouragement. This mastery becomes the foundation upon which the next year is built. The affirmations that finalize the decree must be spoken with the tone of command. A man must say, "December obeys me. Wealth answers me. My decree is law. I carry authority. I enter the new year with dominion." These words must not be whispered. They must be spoken as one speaks truth into stone. He must also say, "I reject the old year. I sever its weakness. I dismiss its fear. I stand as the man who commands his fortune." These affirmations close the spiritual door behind him and prevent the old identity from returning. Then the man must speak his final vow, the vow that seals his authority over December and the year ahead. December obeys me. Wealth follows me. My next year begins now. When spoken with conviction, this vow becomes the decree that governs the man's future. This decree is not symbolic. It is the final stroke that engraves the new identity, the new purpose, and the new destiny into the subconscious. Once engraved, nothing can remove it except the man's own doubt. But if he holds to this decree with firmness, the next year will be shaped by it. The final decree is the gate through which wealth enters. The man must speak it boldly. He must speak it with finality. He must speak it as if the universe were listening, for it is.